My phone wouldn't stop screaming, not with a ringtone, but with that sharp, aggressive vibration that cuts through a room like a serrated knife. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I was sitting in a quiet, dimly lit restaurant, the kind where you can actually hear your own thoughts, and all I could feel was my thigh burning through my pocket. When I finally looked, the screen was a graveyard of notifications, 78 missed calls. My mom's name was plastered across the glass like a warning sign, followed by frantic texts from my dad and my sister. They were desperate. They were angry. They were suddenly very, very aware of my existence. But I just turned the phone face down on the tablecloth and went back to my dinner. My name is Luna. I'm 22 years old, and for most of my life, I was the easy child. You know the type, the one who doesn't make a scene, the one who gets the grades without needing a tutor, the one who basically raises herself so the parents can focus on the problem sibling. In our house, there was this quiet, unspoken hierarchy. My sister was the sun, the center of the universe, and I was just a cold little moon orbiting her, reflecting whatever light she happened to spill. My parents always told people I didn't need much, but what they really meant was they didn't want to give much. It's hard to explain the hollowness that grows in your chest when you realize you're background noise in your own home. Our house looked so perfect from the outside. Framed photos, the smell of fresh coffee, holiday decorations that stayed up way too long. But inside, if I spoke, my parents' eyes would already be drifting toward my sister before I could even finish my sentence. I was invisible in plain sight. I'm still shaking while typing this out. If you've ever felt like the forgotten one in your family or have been through something similar, please subscribe and let me know in the comments. I really need to know I'm not alone in this right now. I thought I had learned how to swallow that disappointment. I thought I was strong because I paid my own tuition and covered my own bills, while my parents bought my sister's car and paid her rent. I told myself it didn't hurt. But then came the moment that changed everything. The moment I realized they weren't just distracted, they were choosing to let me go. And it all started with a simple resort reservation that mattered more than 4 years of my hard work. But as I sat there with my phone buzzing off the table, I realized they were finally seeing the version of me I'd been hiding, and they were absolutely terrified of what it meant for them. What could possibly be in those 78 messages that turned my quiet family into a pack of frantic strangers?
The thing about being the independent one is that your parents eventually start using it as a weapon against you. I remember when I won a writing prize during my sophomore year. I was so proud, I practically ran home to tell them. My mom gave me this thin, distracted smile and said she was proud, but in the very next breath, she asked if I could spend my weekend helping my sister move into her new apartment. That's how it always was. My milestones were just inconveniences that got in the way of my sister's drama. Looking back, the signs were everywhere, screaming at me. They missed my high school award ceremony because my sister had some work event that couldn't be missed. I remember sitting in that auditorium, looking at the empty seats next to me and feeling that familiar, sharp sting in my chest. I learned to smile through it. I learned to tell myself that I was low maintenance and that was a good thing. At the dinner table, every conversation was a monologue about my sister, her job stress, her latest disappointment, her vague plans for the future. My parents listened to her with this intense, leaning in energy, like they were afraid of missing a single word. When it was my turn to speak, it was like I was speaking a language they didn't care to translate. They'd nod politely, eyes glazed over, just waiting for a gap so they could pivot back to the important child. I even had to beg for the basics. Once I asked for help with my textbooks because my part-time job hadn't covered the latest semester's fees. My mom just smiled that same "you're so independent" smile and told me I'd figure it out. Meanwhile, they were paying my sister's credit card bills and covering her apartment deposit without a second thought.
It wasn't that they didn't have the resources, it's that they didn't think I was worth the investment. But then, graduation season started to roll around. This was the big one, the one I had worked 3 jobs for. I thought, surely, for this one day, I could be the center of the orbit. I was so wrong. I didn't know it yet, but my parents were already planning a getaway that didn't include a seat for me, and the reason they gave would finally break the last string holding us together. I still called. Even after years of being overlooked, a small, pathetic part of me still needed to hear the rejection directly. I picked up the phone a few weeks before graduation, my heart doing that weird, uneven thudding in my ribs. I told my mom the date and time. I told her how much it would mean to see them there. She didn't even pause. "We already have plans with your sister," she said, her voice as casual as if she were telling me they were out of milk. They had booked a resort trip. My dad chimed in on the other line, adding that my sister was going through a stressful time and needed them more. They didn't ask what I was feeling. They didn't ask how it felt to graduate after paying every cent of my own way. They just explained that my sister's vacation was a priority over my milestone. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't even argue. I just hung up the phone and stared at the wall of my room. I looked at my cap and gown hanging on the closet door. The fabric looked so heavy and dark in the afternoon light. The sting in my chest was there, sure, but underneath it, there was this cold, hard clarity. I realized I wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. I was done hoping they would suddenly wake up and see me. For the first time in 22 years, I stopped considering how to make them proud and started considering what it would look like to choose myself. I felt lighter, but it was the kind of lightness that comes after you lose something you thought you needed to survive. A few days later, I was at my best friend's house. I was helping her mom fold laundry. Just a normal, quiet afternoon. Her dad walked by and asked how my graduation planning was going. I hesitated, the truth feeling like a lead weight in my mouth. When I finally told them my parents weren't coming because of a resort trip, the silence that followed wasn't the awkward kind I was used to. It was heavy and angry. Her mom set the towels down slowly, and her dad just shook his head in disbelief. "That's not right," her mom said, and then she said the words that changed the course of my life. "We'd love to be there if you want us." I said yes without thinking, but I didn't realize that by inviting them, I was setting off a chain reaction that would end with my parents watching me on a national stage from their hotel room, wishing they'd never left. After I said yes to my friend's parents, everything became strangely quiet. It wasn't a peaceful quiet, though. It was that eerie, heavy calm that settles right before a massive storm hits. I thought about calling my parents back. I thought about trying to soften the blow or explain why I was replacing them. But then I realized I didn't owe an explanation to people who had never made space for me. I was finally deciding for myself, and once that door opened, I couldn't pull it shut again. My family had no idea that my life had been moving in a completely different direction for a long time. While they were obsessing over my sister's latest drama, I was working quietly. I was writing late at night, revising scripts between my classes, and learning how to take rejection without letting it hollow me out. I never talked about it at home because, honestly, no one ever asked. I'd learned long ago not to volunteer information that was just going to be ignored anyway. A few weeks before the ceremony, my manager at my internship pulled me aside in a hallway that smelled like burnt coffee and printer toner. He told me that the project I'd been spearheading had moved forward in a way no one expected. It was huge. It was the kind of thing that makes a career before it even officially starts. He asked if I'd be okay with some public recognition during the graduation ceremony, as the company was a major industry partner for the school. I blinked at him, thinking about the empty seats where my parents were supposed to be. "Yes," I said. I didn't tell my family. It wasn't a got ya moment. It just didn't occur to me to share good news with people who had never celebrated me before. I filled out the school's guest forms. For family guests, I didn't write my parents' names. I wrote the names of the people who actually asked how I was doing without being prompted. On the morning of graduation, the light slipped through my curtains, soft and unbothered. My mom sent me a text, a photo of the view from their resort. I looked at the sparkling water on the screen for a second, then set the phone face down. I didn't feel nervous. I felt grounded. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see the quiet, easy child anymore. I saw someone who had finished something incredibly hard, all on her own. I was ready to walk across that stage, but I had no idea that the recognition my manager mentioned was going to involve a life-changing amount of money and a public snub that would go viral within hours.
The auditorium was a wall of noise, families laughing, hugging, and taking those generic photos that end up forgotten in a drawer. I scanned the crowd out of habit, even though I knew exactly where my parents were not sitting. But then I saw them, my best friend's parents, waving from the family section. Her mom was already clutching a tissue, and her dad was grinning like I was his own flesh and blood. Something warm finally settled in my chest. It wasn't the longing I was used to, it was pure gratitude. Names were called one by one. When it was my turn, I walked across that stage with a steady heart. I shook the dean's hand, took my diploma, and smiled into the applause. It was loud and genuine, and for the first time, it actually felt like it was meant for me. I thought that was the end of it. I was ready to go, sit down, and just be a graduate. But then the dean returned to the microphone. He paused, looking toward the wings of the stage, and said they had a special recognition from an industry partner. A ripple of curiosity moved through the room. My pulse quickened as a woman I'd worked with for years stepped out. She was polished, confident, and she commanded the room without even trying. She started talking about a student whose work had exceeded every expectation, becoming the foundation for a major production moving forward. The room went dead silent. Then she said my name. My legs felt a little unsteady as I walked back onto the stage. The lights were so bright and warm against my skin. She handed me a folder and spoke about the project in careful, rounded numbers. A significant budget, a long-term contract, a commitment that would change my entire life. I didn't look for my parents. I didn't need them to see me anymore. The whole world was seeing me. Then she said the words that would blow my family's world apart. We would also like to acknowledge the parents who supported her throughout this journey. Time seemed to slow down. The woman turned, not toward the empty seats my parents would have had, but toward the section where my best friend's parents were sitting. "Would you please join us on stage?" For a second, nobody moved. The confusion in the room was palpable, but as my friend's parents began that long walk up the aisle, I knew there was no going back. My friend's mom was crying openly by the time she reached the stage, the kind of messy, overwhelmed crying that comes from being included in something you never expected. The industry representative handed them an envelope and a framed certificate, calling it a recognition gift for being the ones who showed up and believed. She stated the amount clearly, without fanfare, and the entire room reacted instantly. There were gasps, then a roar of applause, then people were standing up. I stood there and let the truth exist in the open. I didn't try to hide the facts that these weren't my biological parents. The cameras captured everything, the raw pride on their faces that had nothing to do with blood. Hundreds of miles away, in a resort room they'd chosen over me, my parents were watching. I know they were, because the second I got off that stage and checked my phone in the wings, the proof was there. My phone wasn't just vibrating, it was basically melting in my hand. The transition from ignored to hunted happened in the span of a 20-minute ceremony.
My mom's messages went from casual resort photos to frantic demands for an explanation. My dad was calling over and over. Even my sister, who usually couldn't be bothered to text me back, was suddenly desperate to talk. They had seen the recognition. They had seen the recognition gift amount. And most importantly, they had seen two strangers taking the credit for the daughter they had spent 22 years overlooking. When the ceremony ended and we spilled out into the sun, my friend's parents hugged me so tight I thought they'd never let go. "We're so proud of you," her mom kept whispering. I laughed, I took photos, and I finally breathed. But my pocket kept buzzing. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I finally pulled it out and saw the number. 78 missed calls. Some were pleading, asking why I hadn't told them. Some were angry, accusing me of embarrassing them on a public stage. I didn't open a single one. I turned the phone face down and slid it back into my pocket. We went to dinner, just the four of us. A small place, warm food, and real conversation. My friend's mom noticed my phone buzzing again on the table. She looked at me gently and said, "You don't have to answer that." "I know," I replied, and I meant it. But the drama was only just beginning. By the next morning, the clip of the ceremony had gone viral, and my sister was about to make a public move that would backfire in the most spectacular way possible. The story spread faster than a wildfire. Clips from the ceremony were everywhere. Local news, social media, industry blogs. People were arguing in the comments. Some called me cruel for humiliating my parents, while others called it the ultimate form of justice. I didn't engage with any of it. I didn't need to. My parents tried everything to get back into my good graces. They called mutual friends and left crying voicemails with extended family. My sister even posted this long, sugary public message about how proud she was and how she had always believed in my talent. It was a transparent attempt to save face, and it failed miserably. People have long memories. Old classmates and acquaintances started posting screenshots of things she'd said in the past, old jokes at my expense, comments about how my little projects were a waste of time. The internet didn't buy her supportive sister act for a second. A few days later, my parents reached out through a third party, practically begging for a conversation. They claimed there had been a misunderstanding. They said they deserved to be recognized because, at the end of the day, they were my parents. I listened to the message, and for the first time, I didn't feel that sting of guilt. I just felt done. I realized they weren't calling because they missed me. They were calling because they missed the moment. They missed the prestige, the money, and the spotlight. If I hadn't walked onto that stage and received that recognition, they would still be at that resort, barely remembering that I'd graduated at all. I never responded. My silence wasn't a punishment, it was a boundary. Eventually, the calls slowed down, the frantic messages stopped. My life didn't explode, it settled into something cleaner and quieter. I went back to work, long hours that felt rewarding, because I was building something real for myself. I've spent 22 years believing that love meant endurance, that you had to tolerate being overlooked just because someone shared your DNA. But now I understand something much simpler. Love shows up. Family is the group of people who stay when things are hard and celebrate when things are great. Today, when people ask about my family, I don't hesitate. I talk about the ones who sat in the front row. I talk about the ones who chose me without conditions. Blood didn't make them my family, their presence did. If you're listening to this and you've ever been made to feel small by the people who were supposed to stand beside you, please hear me. You are not wrong for choosing yourself. You are not cold for closing a door that only ever let in a draft. You deserve to be seen. And if your blood won't do it, I promise there are people out there who will. If this story hit home for you, please share your own experience in the comments below. I'm reading as many as I can. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story.